Welcome, everybody, to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. We've got an awesome show for you. And, the last time we watched football, the Chiefs were winning another Super Bowl, an overtime victory over the 49ers. Well, tonight, we've got it. Football is back. A Super Bowl preview? Could be. Texans versus the Bears. I am Adam Azer with Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg. Guys, on a scale of 0 to 0, how excited are you for the Hall of Fame game tonight?
Negative 25 million.
I can't wait. It's football, baby. Come on.
Oh, come on. It's not really football. It's Davis Mills. It's backups, but no, it is football. It's something to watch.
It's Dameon Pierce.
All right,
when the thing to get excited about is Dameon Pierce, it's a negative 25
It's football, baby.
It is football, and we are excited about it. I mean, it starts tonight, and we're pumped. So let's talk about some big topics here. And first of all, I just want to get your thoughts. What are you looking for in preseason in general before we start talking about these teams specifically? Dave, what actually matters in the preseason for fantasy purposes?
Well, you want to make sure that everybody looks like they know what they're doing out there. Now, we could say that the Pittsburgh Steelers offense looked like they knew what they were doing last year, and then Kenny Pickett and that whole offense looked terrible for the majority of the season. So really, it's just about making sure that the players, maybe it's a little bit of bias confirmation or confirmation bias, where you want to see the players and make sure they're doing what you think that they could do. Maybe a player who is kind of under the radar, stepping up and looking better than you thought. I think those things are what people who play fantasy should be looking for in the preseason.
No injuries. That's all. Don't make it hurt.
There's that.
Hopefully Deontay Foreman's okay.
Yes.
Sometimes you can get some playing time, helpful info. Who's playing ahead of who's playing on 3 receiver sets, and who comes off the field on 3 receiver sets, those types of things. But you might just be better off ignoring the results. Otherwise, you're going to take Darren Waller and Daniel Jones really early, and Jahan Dotson's going to be for 3. It was one great drive, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about a different New York team. Let's talk about the Jets. Aaron Rodgers not expected to play in the preseason. It's the guy coming off a torn Achilles. We are putting a lot of faith in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. They are top 13 picks. Jamie, are you okay with that, considering we just don't know? Last time we saw Aaron Rodgers, he really wasn't very good in his last season with the Packers. Are you cool with 2 Jets going in the top 13?
I mean, Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones were pretty good, so I'm not really worried about those guys in particular in terms of Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Look, Wilson's been stuck with, unfortunately, some terrible quarterback play the first 2 years of his career, and we saw in his rookie season when it was Joe Flacco or Mike White, just anybody but Zach Wilson, he was putting up good numbers. In some cases he was over 21 PPR points per game, finished that stretch of game without Zach Wilson over 17 PPR points per game. For Breece Hall, we saw last year, number 1 in receptions. Obviously, you take Alvin Kamara's absence, you factor that in, he would have been second, but was dominant in the passing game. And I think for him in particular, the offensive line upgrades will be just as important as Aaron Rodgers coming back. So everything that the Jets have done this offseason to put around Garrett Wilson, to put around Breece Hall, clearly Aaron Rodgers coming back, that's huge. So both those guys deserve to be first-round picks, and Breece Hall could challenge Christian McCaffrey to be the number 1 running back this year.
It's all about touches for Breece Hall and targets for Garrett Wilson, and Wilson is one of the few wide receivers that we expect to get 10-plus targets per game. He averaged just below that last year, Adam, 9.9, and that was without Aaron Rodgers. So I think that there's definitely a chance that he could be better this year. He's worth that top pick.
Let's talk about a couple of quarterbacks that might be in a battle right now, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Wilson missed a lot of time with a calf injury, and this is really significant because Russell Wilson, he's probably going to be around QB 20 to 24 in average draft position. There won't be a lot of excitement for him, even though he did average the same amount of fantasy points as Jared Goff last year. Justin Fields, on the other hand, 2 years ago, he was the top 6 quarterback per game. Last year, he was 14th per game in 6-point, 10th per game in 4-point, but that was with leaving 1 game early, and that really hurt his per-game averages. So this would shake up the quarterback rankings. Dave, I'll start with you. Let's say Justin Fields wins this battle. Where would you rank him among quarterbacks in fantasy?
He'd be a top 12 quarterback for me. He'd be toward the bottom of that list, but I see the rushing potential for Fields. I think that's awesome. I like what I've read out of Pittsburgh the last couple of days, where his accuracy has improved. Apparently he started training camp, really wasn't that accurate. Last couple of days he's really started to get into the groove. And the Steelers have basically admitted this is now a competition. The calf injury to Russell Wilson has opened the door for Justin Fields to play and potentially be the guy for Pittsburgh. I think he will at some point this season. And when he does, fantasy managers can look at him as a low-end number 1 fantasy QB.
I'm in a super flex draft right now as part of our St. Jude draft-a-thon, and I was a little upset when Justin Fields went right before my pick. He would have been my 4th quarterback. I took Bryce Young ahead of him, and that's probably a mistake as well, just because you're looking for upside. Yeah, Fields would be a top 12 quarterback. You know, the concern would be is if he struggles, they clearly have somebody to go to that they, I would assume, trust in Russell Wilson. So if Fields does have that stretch of bad games, which he's had, unfortunately, several times throughout the course of his career, then they can just turn to Russell Wilson and say, okay, now we're handing the reins over to maybe the guy that they thought was going to be their number 1 quarterback. You know what the Steelers are going to be under Mike Tomlin, in playoff contention, right around 9 to 10 wins. You know, so they're going to have an opportunity to maybe win the AFC North, certainly be in the wild card mix. And if Fields is not getting the job done, then Wilson will be out there. But when you're shooting for upside at this position, Justin Fields has just as much as anybody on the table. So yes, you should be drafting him as a top 12 guy.
I'll tell you what, man, they're going to be last in the AFC North and the NFC North. Yeah. A tough division to win. All right, let's talk about our next topic here. And the Bengals staying in the AFC North. Zach Moss or Chase Brown? Before training camp started, I think it was clearly Zach Moss for most people. Now, last time we did a draft, they went back-to-back because Chase Brown is gaining some momentum. I don't know what I said. It was clearly Zach Moss. I may have said that backwards. It was clearly Zach Moss before training camp started. But anyway, Dave, who are you taking first, Moss or Chase Brown?
I took Chase Brown first in a mock draft that we recently did on the site. And I'll tell you what, at first I was a little bit nervous about it, but I just think about how explosive of a talent we saw. And it was in limited flashes last year. And I compare that to Zach Moss, and you've really done a good job of expressing just how injury-prone Zach Moss has been. And so I'm willing to take that chance with Chase Brown. I want to do it in the middle rounds. I don't want to reach in around 7 for him or anything like that. I don't love hearing from beat reporters in Cincinnati that the Bengals might still be on the lookout for a 3rd down running back. That would be something that would complicate this issue even more. But I think Brown is a little bit more exciting, has a little bit more upside, the younger, flashier running back compared to Zach Moss.
Yeah, I wonder if they're waiting for Samaje Perine to get cut, you know, and somebody that they have a history with. He's in Denver right now, but most likely 4th on that depth chart. I think the thing that you look at when you're building your fantasy roster, Adam, is do you want safety or do you want upside? And Moss feels like he's probably the safer of the two because you saw what he was able to accomplish last year when he was the guy for the Colts. You saw him in spurts with the Bills be the guy and have some success. Chase Brown's an unknown. But if you want the upside, Chase Brown probably is that guy. And so can he build off what he did last year when he got work, double-digit PPR points per game, but it was so sporadic and few and far between. And so this is a preseason thing that you want to see. You know, will they play both guys in the preseason to any extent? Who will get the first touches? Who will be playing on 3rd down? We know the Bengals have thrown to the running backs on 1st and 2nd down. That doesn't necessarily matter, but Zach Moss, by all accounts, is the better running back in terms of pass protection now, and protecting Joe Burrow is more important, I think, than whatever they get from a running down perspective, because hopefully they'll be comparable and competitive throughout the course of the season. So I think just depending on your roster build, you look at whichever guy you think has the more upside, more potential. For me, again, that would be Brown if I'm looking for that type of running back on my team. But if you just want to piece this backfield similar to the Titans, maybe similar to the Steelers, the Cowboys, these ambiguous backfields, just take the guy who's left on the board last, and hopefully that's the best one for you.
Moving on to Jameson Williams for the Detroit Lions. He has had, I guess, a worse than expected start to his career for different reasons. But here he is now with a lot of training camp buzz, hoping he develops into a more complete receiver. And maybe we can get a surprising breakout year from Jameson Williams. I know you guys like him. Are you prepared, or either of you, Jamie, I'll start with you, prepared to take Jameson Williams with a top 100 pick at this point?
Yeah, he's been that way for me for a few weeks. And you know, the thing you're looking for, again, what are the potential upsides and factoring what the downside could be. The downside is you just get the type of player that he's been the last couple of seasons. A couple splash plays here or there, a guy that you have to move on from. Okay, I'm willing to take that risk based on what the upside is. The upside is 3rd-year receiver, 64 vacated targets with Josh Reynolds not there, offense that has an opportunity to play at a very high level, Ben Johnson staying, Jared Goff building off of what he's done the last couple of years, and really a lot of single coverage because when you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, you know, nobody's focusing on taking away Jameson Williams. And so we know the schedule, only 3 games outdoors the entire year. So Jameson Williams is a 3rd-year breakout candidate. He's just not at the same level of Chris Olave and Drake London and Garrett Wilson. But when you talk about Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, if those guys hit, they're going to hit big, and they're going to be fantasy difference makers. So you want those guys on your team.
And I'm starting to warm up to the idea of taking him in round 8. And that's the point in the draft where you can take chances with players. They're not guys that are going to be your anchors in your fantasy lineup, but they could become that. And I've seen some clips out of training camp, the routes that he's running. These are not go routes, Adam, and these aren't screen routes either. These are dig routes with precision. These are hitch routes that look really nice. They've got double moves. He's doing a lot more to be a more complete wide receiver for Detroit, and that's a dangerous subject. If he continues to look good, I think this actually raises the profile of not only Jameson Williams, but Jared Goff as well, because now Goff will be sitting at the helm of an offense with all kinds of really good targets.
Okay, Dave, round 8, huh? How about this? Quick question.
Sure.
Don't even think about it. What's 8 times 12?
108.
No, 96.
96.
See, when you're a fantasy analyst, you need to know how to multiply by 12.
I'm a writer, not a mathematician. Come on, Adam.
But you are very good at ranking. So when we come back, let's find out who's moving up the draft boards. It's Ranking Risers next on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Adam, Dave, and Jamie here. Now, no preseason games yet. We will get one tonight in the Hall of Fame game, but still plenty of training camp reports. So there are a lot of reasons to be moving players up or down in the rankings. We're going to focus on Rankings Risers. Let's start with Dave Richards, Rankings Risers. He is feeling Jalen Hurts, moving him up to QB1. Jameson Williams on the rise as well. Rashod Rice going from, look at this, 10 spots. Wide receiver 40 to wide receiver 30. Chase Brown, look at this, Dave, 10 spots. And then Pat Freiermuth, look at this, 4 spots, Dave, 16th to 12th. Top 12 tight end, Pat Freiermuth. Where do you want to start, Dave?
I'm surprised you didn't say, look at this, Jalen Hurts up 1 spot. But that's where I want to start. And I was nervous when Saquon Barkley signed with Philadelphia that was by design to keep Jalen Hurts healthy, not have him take as many risks running the ball, certainly eliminating the tush-push. The early days of training camp in Philadelphia have suggested that running is still going to be a very major part of what Philadelphia's offense is. That's encouraging. Hurts has also improved his accuracy, according to reports. He's off to a great start in training camp, and we think about the receivers that he's got, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and now Saquon Barkley on top of it. Yeah, I think Jalen Hurts can come close, if not exceed, his high point from last year and maybe even the year before. He can get close to 30 fantasy points per game. I have a tougher time making that case for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen.
I want to ask you about Rashod Rice here because you're moving him up to 30. He was actually the number 8 wide receiver per game in the last 6 games of the year, getting more than 9 targets per game. So I guess I know he's a riser for Jamie too. Why only wide receiver 30 for Rashod Rice?
Because it's a step forward because he hasn't been suspended yet. But I'm still a little bit worried about a suspension eventually coming for Rashod Rice. But I'm also worried about just what that receiving core will do to Rashod Rice's targets. I think he's not going to see quite as many targets per game as he saw last year. Toward the end of the season, into the playoffs, he was far and away the number 1 target among the receivers in Kansas City. Not only is he splitting with Kelsey, that's not new, but Marquise Brown is there, Xavier Worthy is there. And I just don't know if Rashod Rice is going to be able to put up numbers that's going to make him a number 2 fantasy wide receiver. I think it's better and safer to draft him as a wide receiver 3. But because there is no suspension immediately looming, I'm more comfortable taking him as a wide receiver 3 compared to where I was taking him, which is kind of standoffish as a round 9-ish pick.
Would you guys take Jameson Williams ahead of Rome Odunze?
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you take him ahead of Christian Watson?
No.
Would you take him ahead of Marquise Brown? Jameson Williams or Marquise Brown?
Brown.
I have Brown higher.
All right. Let's take a look at Jamie's list. You ready, Jamie? You ready to be under the spotlight here? All right, let's do it. Kyler Murray. Look at this. Up 1 spot. Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren flirting with your top 24. That's pretty cool. Deebo Samuel moving up 2 spots. Jamie loves himself some Hard Knocks. Malik Neighbors up to wide receiver 21. Brian Dable would have him at wide receiver 3 this year probably if he were doing fantasy football. And Keon Coleman moving up a little bit as well. All right, who do you want to highlight here, Jamie?
I mean, you mentioned Jaylen Warren. You know, we just talked about the Bengals backfield. Last year, Jaylen Warren was better than Najee Harris in terms of points per game. Now, what will happen this year under Arthur Smith? What will happen if Justin Fields is the quarterback? It's a huge question because we know Fields will obviously take a lot of the running production from the backfield itself. But It wouldn't be surprising if Warren's better than him again. You know, last year we didn't see we saw the receiving numbers pop. We didn't see receiving touchdown. If the touchdown numbers are equal, you know, the thing that I look at with Arthur Smith, last year he gave 230 carries to Bijan Robinson in that range, 180 plus carries to Tyler Algier. If both these guys are 200 carries each and Warren remains more explosive, he's going to be better than Najee Harris. So they're back-to-back for me right now, 24 and 25. It's kind of similar to what I said about the Bengals backfield. If you're looking for safety, Najee feels a little safer. You're looking for upside. Warren has more upside. If you just want to get a piece of the Steelers' backfield, you just wait to whoever's left on the board. We've done a lot of drafts. I've certainly seen a bunch in best ball where Warren goes ahead of Najee. It's not a huge surprise. And so I just feel like if I can get one of the two guys, I'm okay with it. I would prefer both to be flex options as opposed to guaranteed starters. So that's why 24-25 on the cusp. And I kind of just want to see how this shakes out under Arthur Smith. But we know the better pass catcher is Jaylen Warren. And so PPR, they're back-to-back.
What was it about Deebo Samuel that made you move him up 2 spots to wide receiver 15?
Amazing reports this offseason so far, and who knows how much of that is, hey, let's pump up Deebo while the other guy's sitting on the sideline there, so he needs to know he needs to come back to sort of reestablish himself maybe as the leader of the receiving corps. But you know what Deebo is. You know, he's going to be used in the run game a little bit, and it's sort of a hedge against what happens if something does go wrong with Christian McCaffrey from an injury perspective, because while they'll talk up Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason and Isaac Orendo, whoever they have in the backfield there, Deebo's carries will bump up if McCaffrey does miss any time. So the reports have been positive. And look, right now Ayuk's not in camp. And so it's hard to say you should draft Ayuk over Deebo. Deebo was actually better than him last year in terms of points per game. The injury risk is there. You got to worry about that. But Deebo's role locked in. And if he's in better shape, ready to go, he could be a top 10 fantasy receiver.
Dave, how do you feel about Kyler Murray? He's a small riser for Jamie, but I think 8th now.
I like him a lot. I actually think he might be the best value among quarterbacks in our CBS ADP, average draft position, because you can get him so late. And he does have the potential to deliver in the neighborhood of 25, 26 fantasy points per game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. And why does he have that potential? He can run. He's got a great number 1 wide receiver, brand new, in Marvin Harrison Jr. I expect him to get a ton of targets and to lead Arizona in receiving. Trey McBride was a great weapon for him last year, and this is an evolving Arizona offense, and I think they're going to be competitive this year. I don't really like their defense, and that means that they're going to give up a lot of points, and that means Kyler is going to have to shoulder the load, and I think he can match up on the scoreboard. We will see some high-scoring games from the Arizona Cardinals. That's really good for Kyler Murray. And the best part is he's kind of a bargain. He's not going to be one of the first 5, 6, or even 7 quarterbacks taken in a fantasy draft this year. So you can wait a little bit, enjoy the value, and still have some upside. By the way, last few years, he's never been below 20 fantasy points per game, so he's got a safe floor as well.
2 years removed from the ACL, I think the running projection that we saw from Sportsline is a little bit low. I think he could be north of 500 yards. And the thing that I like about it is you're not hearing, is he focused? Is he, in the playbook? Is he studying? He took everybody with him this offseason to come throw, and it was every receiver, every tight end, every running back. They're all in. And you're hearing MVP talk around the Cardinals about Kyler Murray. I think that's a stretch. He would have to have just a ridiculously amazing season. They'd have to win the NFC West, which is also, I think, a stretch given the teams that are there. But if they are in playoff contention, it's because of Kyler Murray, and I think he's going to have a huge year. I draft him. I told you this, Adam, on our podcast. He's the quarterback between best ball and redraft I have the most exposure to, and I'm perfectly fine with that. You should probably draft a second quarterback just in case, but I don't think you need to. I think he's just got the ability to be a top 5 guy this year.
We got to talk about Malik Nabers moving up to wide receiver 21. Are you guys comfortable with Malik Nabers as a 4th-round pick at this point?
Yeah, at one point. So I actually moved him up, and then I moved him back down a little bit. So I had him at one point at wide receiver 19. I like the upside, at least for now, of DK Metcalf and George Pickens a little bit better than Nabers just because of their quarterback situation. I know that's hard to say with Pittsburgh, but the Giants situation, every time you see Daniel Jones, it's 3 bad throws, then 1 highlight reel to Malik Nabers. But the thing that I love about the situation for him is he's going to get fed targets. And so while Wan'Dale Robinson, I think, gets a boost this year, and we'll see what happens with the tight end position, and Darius Slayton quietly has been a very undervalued fantasy option, let alone a good receiver for the Giants. This run game is probably going to be terrible. They're going to be chasing points, I think, quite a bit. I love that Brian Daboll's calling plays again. He's in meetings according to reports, taking control of the offense, and it feels like there's a better vibe around the Giants this year than there was last year. So what Nabers should be able to do as a rookie, he's not going to, I think, compete at the Marvin Harrison level, but it wouldn't be surprising if he's not far behind. So it just feels a little odd to say, we're all in on Marvin Harrison. Yes, the quarterback situation is better. Nabers may be the better talent. There are a lot of people that thought that. And so I don't think he's going to produce far behind. So I would take him in round 4 without hesitation.
He's got rare acceleration, and that's what separates him from a lot of wide receivers in the NFL, not just Marvin Harrison. It was on our show on Monday when you got my mind going a little bit on comparing Malik Nabers to DJ Moore last year. Remember, DJ Moore, the only guy getting targets in Chicago, didn't have a great quarterback. What did he do? Career best season for fantasy, over 16 PPR points per game. Malik Nabers could be in that same type of spot where he's getting a lot of targets. We're talking 8 per game. Not necessarily a good quarterback. Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, that's not great. But the volume should be there. Hopefully the on-target passing won't be too bad. And hopefully the end zone targets will be huge for Malik Nabers as well. He can do a lot of that. I like him as a late round 4 pick.
Yeah, it's the first, I think, 5 seasons of DJ Moore's career that concern me, because he's always been a great wide receiver. He's never had that fantasy season because he couldn't find the end zone. His quarterbacks have been so bad. But hopefully Malik Nabers can do what DJ Moore did last.
I think puts him in the number 2 receiver range based on the other things he'll accomplish.
And you can't rule out more than that just because of Giants playing from behind, Giants throwing so much, his own ability. There's a lot that's going for Malik Nabers. The worst thing is nothing to do with him, everything to do with his quarterback.
Well, those are the rankings risers. Who is falling in the rankings for Dave and Jamie? We'll tell you after this break on Fantasy Football Today. We are back on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm Adam Azer with Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg. In our last segment, we were talking about DJ Moore, comparing him to Malik Nabers. Well, let's talk about DJ Moore now as a rankings faller. He is atop Dave's list of rankings fallers, and he is down 8 spots from wide receiver 14 to wide receiver 22. So you were kind of the DJ Moore guy, Dave. He was a top 12 wide receiver per game last year, but now fallen outside of your top 20.
He had 4 games last year with 10 or more targets. They were 4 of his 6 best games on the year. Over his other 13 games, he had 9 targets in 4 games. He had 22 plus PPR in half. 8 targets in 2 games, he was terrible. 7 targets in 1 game, he was good. 6 targets or fewer in 6 other games, not so good. He was more of a borderline number 2, number 3 type of fantasy receiver. And I know the Bears are going to throw more this year, but I can't say with certainty that DJ Moore is going to see an uptick in targets, much less even stay the same in targets, which is 8 per game. And if his track record is just one of those guys that he needs volume in order to be really, really good, then this is somebody that I can't overdraft. So I'm taking a little bit of my own medicine here. I've preached all offseason. You don't want to draft somebody too close to their ceiling. Where I was taking DJ Moore was maybe above his ceiling. And now he's ranked more appropriately for me below his ceiling, much closer to the floor, right around other receivers that I would expect to have around 13.5, 14 PPR points per game.
Yeah, leave this graphic up for a second because you brought up something before and Adam asked you about the Rashod Rice ranking, and you said you don't want him as a number 2 receiver, you want him as a number 3 receiver. That's obviously ideal. Look at the names on this list. These are all number 2 receivers. You can nitpick once you get past 20, 15, 25, depending on how you view these guys. They all have the potential to be top 20 wide receivers if things go right, an injury occurs,
sure,
the target volume goes up. Nobody was ever saying, and I think you probably agree, that DJ Moore shouldn't be drafted as a starter in 3 receiver leagues and still a starter in 2 receiver leagues. He's actually 25th for me. He's always been in that range, 23 through 27 I've kind of fluctuated with. I would love to have DJ Moore on my roster. I know where we always disagree was you were taking him in round 3. For me, it's round 4. And a lot of the reason why I'm taking my 25th wide receiver in round 4 is because I'm going heavy on wide receiver. So I have no problem not necessarily reaching for DJ Moore or different roster construction, but he's going to be very good. He's just not going to be the same player that he was a year ago. Clearly, the Bears paid him that way. I love this comment because Muhsin Muhammad once upon a time said Chicago's where receivers go to die. They've obviously played a lot better over the course of the last couple of seasons, DJ Moore being a big part of that. He's going to be fine. He's just not going to be the same caliber of player that he was last year from a statistical standpoint. Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, all these other guys. So just be cautious when you're reaching for DJ Moore. Draft him in the right spot, and I'm glad you're on board with that.
Yeah, Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer. I hope that can change soon. And by the way, you saw that list, and you heard what Jamie said about taking his wide receiver 25 in round 4. Jamie does a lot of 3-receiver league drafts. So if you're in a 2-receiver league draft, they may not go that early. In fact, average draft position will show that T. Higgins and Mari Cooper, who are on that list, are not going until almost the end of round 5.
Yeah, but
So
I'll just push back on one thing with that. If it's 2 receivers and a flex, I'm still taking the receivers early.
Okay. I think that most people are not going to take their receivers as early as you if they're in a 2-receiver league. But fair enough.
Will, and it'll depend on scoring, too. Like, what if it's non-PPR? Then obviously you'll change your tune on that.
I think
at PPR, maybe you will.
I think we're on the same page that it was PPR.
This is a good talking point for everybody. Know your league rules before your draft so you know what you're getting into. Make sure you know how many wide receivers you start, what catches are worth, etc. People need to be reminded of that at least once a year. Now's a good time as any to do that.
Yeah. My favorite is when we'll do a mock draft, and Jamie will have named it like July half PPR mock draft. And then at least one person in the chat before the draft will be like, is this half PPR? Like, hey, just read the thing. Dave,
I try to make it obvious.
Yeah, you do a good job. Did you apply the same logic to Michael Pittman, moving him down 8 spots from 15th to 23rd, where you felt like you were drafting him at his ceiling before?
Yeah, I was always kind of cold on Pittman, and I just decided to be ice freezing cold on Michael Pittman. And it's because of what we saw in a couple of games last year with Anthony Richardson under center. He didn't get nearly as many targets as he did when Gardner Minshew was under center. And you look at Indianapolis's offense, Jonathan Taylor will be back. That might push down just how many pass attempts we see from Anthony Richardson. They added A.D. Mitchell. Alec Pierce is making plays. There's all kinds of talk about their tight ends there. I'm worried about the target volume for Michael Pittman, who already is a liability in the red zone for Indianapolis, at least for fantasy managers. Maybe the Colts love him in the red zone because he'll draw some coverage away, maybe even a double team because he's so big. But they don't throw to him down there. And when they're inside the 5, it's going to be nothing but running with Richardson and Taylor on the field. So I would take a very cautious approach with Michael Pittman. Easily would rather draft DJ Moore, would rather draft Malik Neighbors than him as well.
What made you drop Zach Moss and DeAndre Swift 6 spots? Oh, and Raheem Mostert. They all like scored a negative touchdown, Dave. 6 spots fewer.
I think it's a little bit about just how other running backs have gone up my rankings, more so than them going down. Zamir White's moved up. I'm feeling a little bit more confident in James Conner. I look at David Montgomery as the RB2 that I'm willing to settle for. Those other running backs I'm not quite as excited about settling for as RB2s. They're kind of borderline RB2, RB3s for me.
Okay, let's look at Jamie's followers here. Patrick Mahomes from 1 to 3. What did he do wrong, Jamie?
Nothing. And I'm probably going to change the top 3 quarterbacks 100 times between now and the end of August. I love all 3 of them. I'm probably not going to draft any of them just because where they're being selected. Right now, they're all in the round 2 range for average draft position on our site, so that's a little too pricey for me. But when you look at what Josh Allen, who's now my quarterback 1, and Jalen Hurts, as Dave alluded to before, the running upside is just too hard to ignore. And actually, the reason I moved Josh Allen back to 1 was our talk with Katie Mox on Monday, when I said to her, what if he gets to 10? I've kept saying
10 rushing touchdowns.
10 rushing touchdowns. I kept saying 7, 8 because that's kind of where he's averaged. If he gets to 10, those 3 more than where he's typically been at 7. And I like what Keon Coleman, which you saw was a riser for me. I like what I'm seeing from him as well and hearing out of Buffalo. So maybe they do have a better receiving core than we're going to give him credit for because Dalton Kincaid and James Cook and the auxiliary parts of Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel. So Allen feels a little bit safer. Hurts feels a little bit safer. Mahomes, they're trying to win a Super Bowl. They don't care about stats. He's going to be in the MVP conversation no matter what because he's Patrick Mahomes. So, yes, he'll be better. He's not going to be QB 10 like he was last year. They're going to challenge downfield. Would not surprise me at all if Mahomes is the number 1 quarterback. And he's going to run for 400 yards, and yes, he's going to get a rushing touchdown. He didn't have that last year. So he could easily be QB 1. So if you look in my consensus, my top 200, they're back-to-back-to-back. I have no problem if you take Mahomes first, Hurts first, Allen first. They're all going to be awesome. For me, I just put Allen at the top, and I move Mahomes behind Hurts just again because of the rushing ability for the other 2 guys.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you on your Josh Allen thoughts here about him. What if he gets to 10 rushing touchdowns? Because, yeah, what if he gets to 10 rushing touchdowns? My concern is, what if he stays at 29 passing touchdowns? Basically what happened last year, one of the reasons why he got so many more rushing touchdowns was he ran the ball more when he was near the end zone and he threw the ball less. So I basically think he took his 35 to 37 touchdown passes that he had the 3 previous seasons. That went down to 29, and he made up for it with the rushing touchdowns. What if their offense just isn't as good and he doesn't score as many touchdowns? I do think the rushing touchdowns might be there. I don't know about 15, but I think 10. It's the passing touchdowns I'm worried about with him. Losing Diggs is an absolutely huge deal. So Josh Allen is a clear QB3 for me.
It's certainly valid. I mean, again, that's the negative against Allen, and can he do it again, be QB1 or QB2? I do think, based on the projections here, I think the yardage is a little bit low. I do think he'll be 30-plus touchdowns and 10 rushing touchdowns. So he's going to be around 600, 700 rushing yards. I would not be surprised if he's a 45 touchdown guy, total touchdown guy. So, again, is Keon Coleman going to step in and be Stephon Diggs? No. But will the combination of Coleman and Kincaid, a better Kincaid, Knox, Shakir, Samuel, be better than the collective group a year ago? It wouldn't surprise me. Gabe Davis was a huge disappointment last year from what he did as a receiver. Obviously a great run blocker. That's why they kept him on the field as much as they did. Samuel's role is very fun, just based on knowing what Joe Brady did. Shakir really stepped up Week 18 into the playoffs. Again, I'm a big Kincaid guy. I think James Cook's going to be a huge factor in the passing game. So I'm excited about Josh Allen. And I know that's hard to say because you have to draft him first. Again, from a ADP versus ranking, it sounds hypocritical a little bit. He's my favorite quarterback, but I'm not going to draft him. It's just because I'm not going to spend the capital to go get him. But I think he's going to have the best season. So at least for right now, he's my number one QB.
Sure, yeah. I'm excited about him too, but he's top 3 quarterback, still obviously really good. Brock Bowers, you moved down 3 spots. He was number 10. Now Brock Bowers is tight end 13 for you. Why?
Well, I think, we talked about this on our tight end preview on our podcast. You should definitely take a listen to it, when trying to invest in the tight end position. It was a great conversation. For Bowers, it's will he be able to produce in an offense that's going to be run-centric with 2 quarterbacks that who knows who's going to be the starter, and are they any good based on Aiden O'Connell and the uncertainty, or Gardner Minshew just being a guy? Davante Adams is going to dominate targets. And I've said this, that I think he's going to probably lose 15 to 20 targets off the 175 plus that he's had each of the last 2 seasons. That's not enough to make Bowers a top 10 tight end for me. You still have Jacoby Myers there. I think it feels like everybody's forgetting about him, that Bowers is going to come in and clearly be the number 2 guy in terms of targets. I hope that's the case, but it's not a guarantee. And Michael Mayer's getting a lot of hype this offseason, so is he going to be a little bit of an annoying factor in Bowers taking that step forward? So when you talk about upside, he has as much as anybody past the top 8 guys, which ends with that Kittle, Ingram, Pitts group. After that, you could say he's better than Ferguson, better than Njoku. I certainly get that. It feels like if you draft Bowers, you got to take 2 tight ends because you just don't know what you're going to get. I don't necessarily want to make that investment where I have to take Bowers. I think by the end of the season, we'll have a very productive fantasy option. But I think when you look at what he's going to do, look at Dalton Kincaid last year. A good streaming option at times, just not consistent. So if that's the type of tight end you want, draft him. But I don't want to invest heavily in him. I think his ADP is a little too high.
All right. Dave, I just want to say hi. Haven't spoken to you in a few minutes. You're rested.
I'm enjoying the conversation. I am a Bowers guy, and I like that Luke Getsy's calling the plays in Las Vegas. We saw the last 2 years in Chicago. Tight end target volume was 22% of the total targets went to that position. They didn't draft him to not be involved. He'll be second on that team in targets. And I think that they can use him in a ton of different ways near the goal line. And I think we'll see him spike in touchdowns. He's one of my favorite picks to get late round 9 into round 10.
Well, when we come back on Fantasy Football today, we're going to look at 6 teams that we drafted in a recent draft. It was just a few days ago. We each were drafting in 2 different spots in the draft. So we're going to compare these teams. Did Brock Bowers make it onto one of Dave's teams? We'll find out after this. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. So we call this our pick-by-pick series. We did a draft on Monday. Each of us was responsible for 2 teams. So, for example, Jamie had picks 1 and 7. I had picks 3 and 9. You'll see what Dave had. And we try to find the best ways to build a roster from each spot in the draft. What we're going to do now is compare the 2 teams that each of us drafted. And let's start with Jamie's. So Jamie, again, he had the first pick, which was sweating. He went with Christian McCaffrey, very controversial. We're going to see how you built that team. And you said you didn't really love this team, but here is what you did with the number 1 pick in a 12-team, 3-receiver, full PPR league. Go ahead and break it down for us.
So, I mean, I love a lot of it. It's not a typical roster build for me because the receiving core isn't as dominant as I would typically like. And I don't necessarily love having questions at the flex spot. But I have a top 5 quarterback on paper, a top 4 tight end on paper, and arguably the best running back duo in this league if McCaffrey and Derrick Henry stay healthy. I think you're going to see somewhere in the neighborhood of the number 1 running back and something in the 8 to 10 range, but Henry has more upside than that if he is Derrick Henry. So I love that part of the roster. Now, Nico Collins is wide receiver 13 for me. Christian Kirk is just outside the top 24. And then Jaden Reed is closer to, a wide receiver 4 than he is a top 30 caliber guy. So there's a lot of question marks there at that position. Again, in PPR, I don't love it, but I kind of just took a best player available approach after I went with Nico Collins and Derrick Henry. I didn't want to not have a good second wide receiver. Christian Kirk was the best guy for me on the board. And then it was, okay, Trey McBride's still there in round 5. That feels like a gift. Joe Burrow around 6. Okay, I'll take the quarterback value there. And so hopefully, Jameson Williams, as we talked about, Rome Odunze's got plenty of potential. Jaleel McLaughlin, could be the best running back in Denver. Ty Chandler, by the end of the season, could be the best running back for Minnesota. So there's a lot of upside. But again, just the receiving core not having a strong trio and a safe flex, I just don't love coming away from my draft without those positions solidified.
But this is the expectation of a team that picks from the 1 slot, because you're getting Christian McCaffrey, and so you're pretty much not going to get a shot at any of your top 10 wide receivers, much less top 12. I think the Derrick Henry choice also isn't necessarily realistic. I think he's going to go sooner in a lot of drafts that happen out there. But you're starting 7 players in this draft, and you might have one weak spot amongst those 7 because you addressed tight end and because you addressed quarterback when you could have addressed wide receiver instead. I think it's a good team, and especially having Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry. I mean, they might be both top 5 fantasy running backs by the end of the year.
So just to your point, Derrick Henry could go sooner. I usually, when I do this, and Adam screwed me because he decided to take both offense receivers, but Jaylen Waddle's usually there, who's a top 12 guy for me. That's usually the turn that I make, which is Waddle and Collins, and I'm a little bit happier about going that route as opposed to Derrick Henry. But clearly, if Henry hits, then there's a little bit more upside at that position.
All right, let's take a look at Jamie's other team from the 7 spot here, and you're definitely, I would say a little bit more of a focus on wide receiver in this one, Jamie. How about 0 RB, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver? Do you like the way this team turned out? And a reminder to our viewers, we start 3 receivers and a flex. It's PPR.
Yeah, I'm not usually a 0 RB guy. I'm more of a hero RB guy, and so Jamar Chase round 1, pick 7. That's easy. Drake London for me is a guy that I'll take in round 2 all the time. You heard with the rankings risers, Deebo Samuel. So once I'd made these 3 selections, it was kind of a no-brainer. Let's see if I could play this out and take a 0 RB approach. So I took Deebo over Sam Laporta. I don't have it ranked that way, but again, it was kind of let's see how this works out. Metcalf I took over Josh Jacobs. That's something we talked about on our podcast. That could be something that comes back to haunt me if I don't get the production from Metcalf that I'm expecting. But round 5, round 6, I took Kincaid maybe a little bit too soon just because McBride and Andrews went in the same round. I don't know if those guys should all be back to back to back, but I love the upside there for him. And then C.J. Stroud in round 6. So I executed the strategy the way that you're supposed to. And then it was, okay, let's throw a lot of capital at the running back spot. So Brooks, clearly a questionable number 1 running back, but I made the effort to take, Chuba Hubbard, so I have at least that backfield locked up. Brian Robinson can easily be a top 20 running back this year. The way that I described Devin Singletary and Gus Edwards in the story is you want some running backs that are kind of plug-and-play guys that have the potential to get you through a couple weeks. I think Singletary and Edwards qualify as that. A lottery ticket type of guy in Braylon Allen. So receivers covered, quarterbacks covered, tight ends covered. If I just get 2 top 20 caliber running backs out of this group, or guys that I'll pick up off the waiver wire, it might be the best team in the league if the receiver sits at the level that they're capable of. So you can't execute 0 RB, you can't have a good roster. You just have to feel comfortable knowing that your running backs are probably not going to be the safest variety. They're not going to be Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry.
Let's go to team 3 here, which was drafted by Adam, and see how Adam feels about it. Well, thank you. I like this team quite a bit. Except I did make a mistake with Jaylen Waddle in round 2. It should have been Devontae Adams. Waddle was my favorite player on the board there, but don't do 2 Dolphins receivers. I should have done Devontae Adams there. Funny story about why I took Jaylen Waddle. I'll tell it on the podcast someday. One of the big things that I want to express to people, this is maybe just my opinion, but there is a trio of running backs, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, and Ken Walker, that are often going late in round 4 or early into round 5. I believe that they are borderline RB1s. I think Kamara could be a top 5 or 6 running back in PPR. So I think you can wait until round 4 to select your first running back and build out your other positions. So that's Kamara, Mixon, and Walker. If you like them as RB1s, and Walker's having a great camp, by the way, then you can get them late in round 4. I think that is tremendous value. So I'm happy with the way this team turned out. I have my favorite quarterback, or my second favorite quarterback actually behind Mahomes. I have Evan Ingram, who's a top 8 wide receiver or tight end. I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba this year. Rico Dowdle could make or break this team. He's off to a good start in camp, but I just need him to be a flex. But he's got the opportunity to be the starter for the Cowboys. I do like the way this team turned out. And let's take a look at Team 9 now, which I also like, but I don't have as good of running back depth. I built these teams similarly, as you can see, with a quarterback in round 3, with the 8th or 9th best tight end. It was Ingram for team 3. It's Ferguson here. I just don't have good running back depth, but I'm pretty good at wide receiver with Brown, Barkley, Mahomes, and Pickens, Godwin. I like this team. I didn't like it as much as team 3. Not exactly sure why, but I would say it's probably just my running back depth. I'm a little bit more comfortable with it with team 3. Dave, let's take a look at your teams here, and starting with team 6, where you took Justin Jefferson. And what do you want to say about team 6?
I loved picking 6th. I would have preferred a running back over Justin Jefferson, but Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, they were gone by the time I was up. So Jefferson, the fallback plan, no problem there. And then in round 2, you're going to like the running backs that are going to wait for you in that range. So I knew I'd get somebody like ETN. Maybe was hoping for someone like Saquon or Kyren Williams to fall there. Derrick Henry might be there in your drafts, but you're going to like the running back that you get in round 2 when you're picking in the middle in a PPR draft. And then I just took a ton of upside. Ayuk in round 3.
And a ton of Packers.
Josh Jacobs in round 4. I do like the Green Bay offense this year, but there is going to be a problem. How many weeks will Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs and Christian Watson all go off? And I don't think there will be that many, but I do think that Jacobs can have a strong season. And I do like Jordan Love to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Wicks and Lloyd are backups for them. Really just took value with Austin Eckler, not somebody that I'm a huge fan of. But this is a team that I don't mind. And look at Hunter Henry at the end there. That's a sleeper tight end if you decide to stream tight ends at the beginning of the year. This is my team at the end of a draft. I could not get my hands on a stud wide receiver. Garrett Wilson went 10th. Puka Nacua went 11th, so I went back-to-back at running back. And I was freaking out in the draft, guys. I was worried, well, what am I going to have at wide receiver? This is a 3-wide receiver league plus a flex. I got Kupp, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, Rashod Rice, back-to-back, Jack. I love those 4 wide receivers to go with 2 superstar running backs in Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor. Decent value at quarterback late with Herbert and Kirk Cousins. And Brock Bowers, we've already talked about how much he's a favorite of mine. I also like Pat Freiermuth as a sleeper. So there you go. 3 tight end sleepers that you can get round 9 plus in your draft. Bowers and Freiermuth on this team, Hunter Henry on the other team.
When we come back, we will hear from our audience. It is Fill in the Blank next on Fantasy Football Today. Back here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, and it is time for some Fill in the Blank. And here we go. Our first one comes from Sean, and he says, blank is the player who's being drafted outside the top 4 rounds, but feel has the best chance to be a top 5 player this year.
But be a top 5 player. We talked a lot about Kyler Murray earlier in the show. That makes a lot of sense. And his ADP on CBS, I just have it open on my laptop right now. It's way late. It's into round 8 plus. That's somebody who could absolutely be a top 5 player.
Top 5 overall player or top 5 at his position?
Let's say overall player, and the answer is Malik Nabers.
Sure.
How do you feel about that? All right, let's go.
I don't know how much longer he's going to be outside the top 4 rounds, Adam.
That's true. The best player to not start the season but could become a league winner is blank.
Jonathan Brooks is an easy one, just in case he's on the PUP list.
Can you make the case for TJ Hawkinson?
No.
No? I think you can make the case. I just don't know how good of a case it is because of the quarterbacks there. But if we see McCarthy really take that step forward in the next couple of weeks, then I think Hawkinson could do it.
All right, last one is going to be a fun one. It's about food. Pineapple is blank on pizza.
Terrible.
It's not the best. It's not the best topping that you want on a pizza. But if you like pineapple and you like pizza and you're about 6'3", 295, you'll probably eat pineapple on pizza. Adam, I got to fill in the blank for you.
What?
All right.
Well, we got to go, man. That was not cool. For Fantasy Football Today. If you liked our show, check out our podcast. It's also called Fantasy Football Today. For Dave and Jamie, I'm Adam. Talk to you next time on Fantasy Football Today.